The void above Terra burns. 1,000 suns die in the storm, their light devoured by the madness that spills from the War Master's fleet. Across the shattered heavens, the Emperor's chosen bleed, their prayers drowned beneath the thunder of heresy. And somewhere amidst that ruin, a single winged figure soars through fire and shadow, alone. Sanguinius, the angel of Baal, knows this moment was never meant to be. His foresight has haunted him for years. Visions of his brother, lost to the warp, eyes alight with the fires of damnation. Yet the timeline fractures just as the stars themselves. The call of destiny reaches him too soon. He feels Horus's presence on the vengeful spirit, burning like a wound in the fabric of reality. And something within him breaks. He cannot wait for his father's command. He cannot watch another world fall. He takes flight. Through the smoke and ruin, his wings cut across the darkness like twin blades of light. Vox channels scream for him to return, but he does not answer. Every beat of his heart is prayer and defiance. Every feather carries the burden of a dying age. He believes still that his brother can be saved. He believes until the moment he steps aboard that cursed ship, because on the vengeful spirit, destiny dies first, and the angel is the one who kills it. Before we walk this darker path, stand with us, Lore Seeker. Let this vision not fade into the warp. Like this chronicle, share it with those who still wonder what might have been, and subscribe so you never miss another descent into the forgotten echoes of the 41st millennium. Together, we'll uncover the stories the Imperium was never meant to remember. The war for terror had entered its final dirge. Smoke veiled the sky, turning the sun into a dying ember behind walls of ruin. The earth trembled beneath the footfalls of titans, and the air itself bled static from the psychic storms that screamed across the planet. Every man who still drew breath upon the cradle of humanity knew the end had come. Yet within the walls of the Imperial Palace, one figure stood unmoving before the burning horizon, his white wings catching the light of a world on fire. Sanguinius, the great angel, the redeemer of Baal, closed his eyes and saw not the battlefield before him, but the future that waited beyond it. The visions had returned. They came as they always did, sudden, searing, merciless. He saw a throne of gold surrounded by darkness. He saw his father, broken, silent, entombed in eternity, and he saw his brother Horus, laughing amidst the ashes of mankind. The images burned through his soul, and for a moment, he thought he heard his father's voice, not in command, but in mourning. He fell to his knees, clutching the hilt of his sword, and whispered a prayer to a god he no longer understood. The Legion's voices echoed faintly through the Voxnet, reports of breaches, calls for reinforcement, oaths sworn and broken in the same breath. His sons were dying below, thousands of them, their blood soaking the stones of terror. And yet, for all his might, he could do nothing but watch the inevitable unfold. The Emperor had forbidden him to act alone. The plan was clear: wait until the shields faltered, then strike together. But Sanguinius's heart was never meant for patience. He had seen too much. He had felt too much. In every flicker of warp light, he sensed Horus calling to him, not with words, but with memories. The warmth of camaraderie, the brotherhood they once shared, now twisted into a summons that clawed at the edges of his soul. He rose, slow and deliberate, the light of the burning horizon glinting off his armor. Each movement was a farewell. He turned toward the teleportarium, his wings folding tight against his back, feathers streaked with soot and blood. He paused only once, his gaze lifting toward the distant golden dome where his father still waged war through thought alone. "Forgive me," he whispered, "but I cannot let him face damnation without me." The custodians at the chamber doors looked upon him in silence. None dared to stop him. They knew the look in his eyes, that haunted, resolute fire that marked a Primarch who had already accepted his death. When the teleporter flared to life, its light bathed the angel in pale gold. His form dissolved in radiance, ascending into the void above Terra. For a heartbeat, he felt weightless, suspended between worlds. Then the darkness took him. The vengeful spirit loomed before him, an abomination of metal and madness, its hull writhing as though alive. Once a vessel of the lunar wolves, it now pulsed with the heartbeat of the warp. Tendrils of psychic rot crawled along its flanks, and the screams of demons echoed faintly through the void. Sanguinius felt them before he heard them, the countless souls devoured by this ship, crying out from beyond reason. He gripped the hilt of his blade tighter. "I am coming for you, brother," he murmured. "Not to slay you, but to save what remains." The teleport beam scattered, and the angel materialized within the ship's corrupted corridors. The air was thick with decay, each breath tasting of oil and blood. Lights flickered along walls, etched with blasphemous runes, and the distant sound of chanting echoed through the decks. Shadows moved, not of men, but of things wearing men's shapes. And yet, amid the stench of corruption, he felt something almost familiar. Horus's presence, vast, cold, and terribly aware. Sanguinius spread his wings, casting shards of light through the dark. The ship responded, groaning as if the light itself offended it. The angel took a single step forward, then another. His heart beat steady. His mind burned with purpose. He did not come as a warrior. He came as a brother. But in the depths of the vengeful spirit, there are no brothers anymore. Only gods, and the ghosts they make. The light of the teleport faded, leaving only darkness. For a moment, Sanguinius stood still, his breath slow, his wings hanging heavy against his back. The radiant white of his feathers had dimmed to grey, singed by the psychic storms of translation. The air around him crackled, thick, wrong, as though the ship itself resented his presence. The corridors of the vengeful spirit stretched before him, like the veins of some ancient beast, pulsing faintly with crimson light. The walls were alive, not metaphorically, but truly alive. Flesh had merged with metal, veins with conduits, and the steady heartbeat of the ship echoed beneath his boots. Every step he took was answered by a faint, wet pulse, as though the vessel itself drew breath. Once, this had been the pride of the lunar wolves, the spearhead of the Great Crusade, a name that inspired awe across the stars. Now it was a shrine to corruption. The banners that once bore the sigil of the wolf lay tattered, overwritten with demonic script. The honor markings of campaigns past had been replaced by chains of bone, skulls fused into bulkheads, and candles made of rendered fat flickering in patterns that whispered. He moved silently, yet the ship knew. Whispers followed him, faint at first, then growing bolder. Words in languages no human tongue should form, weaving through his mind like cold smoke. He could almost understand them. They spoke of love, of envy, of betrayal. They spoke his name, not as it was, but as it would be if he failed. At the end of a corridor, movement caught his eye. Shapes stirred in the gloom. Armored figures, their once white plate now blackened and rusted. The lunar wolves, his brothers in arms, the sons of Horus, long since surrendered to the rot. Their armor wept ichor from the joints, and their visors glowed with embers of warp fire. They did not speak. They merely watched as he passed, like sentinels of damnation, weapons lowered in reverence or hesitation. Sanguinius stopped before one, a massive warrior whose shoulder still bore the faded emblem of the 16th Legion. For a brief, impossible moment, recognition flickered. The warrior's hand trembled. A ghost of who he once was lingered behind the hollow lenses. Then the demon inside remembered what it had become. The creature screamed, not in rage but in agony, and lunged. The angel moved like light-given form. His blade arced once, swift and merciful, severing the warrior's head. It fell with a dull thud, and for a heartbeat, silence returned. Then the corridor itself seemed to shriek, walls twisting in response to the kill, veins pulsing faster, blood leaking from seams in the metal. He exhaled, sorrow dulling his triumph. "I am sorry, brother," he whispered. "You deserved better than this." The whispering grew louder now, no longer faint, no longer distant. It was laughter, soft, knowing laughter. Horus. It resonated through the hull, through the psychic fabric of the ship, and into Sanguinius's mind. Not as sound, but as memory. Voices from another time. Brothers in golden armor, laughing on the parade decks of Eleanor, when the dream was still alive. That memory twisted, warped, and bled into the present until the laughter became a mockery. Sanguinius's wings flared wide, scattering the darkness for an instant. "Show yourself," he hissed. The voice came from everywhere at once. "You came early, brother. You always were the most impatient of us." The ship trembled. The light shifted. Somewhere deep within its heart, something stirred, vast, powerful, waiting. Sanguinius felt it now, pulsing through the decks like a heartbeat. Horus was aware. Horus was awake. He pressed onward, through halls that bent in impossible geometries, where gravity faltered and the laws of reality bled thin. The deeper he went, the stronger the pull became. Not physical, emotional. Memories, guilt, affection, all twisted into chains. At last, he came to a great door, once carved with the sigil of the War Master. Now it bore the mark of chaos itself, a swirling eye of madness. The metal was slick with blood, and the whispers had become a chant, echoing from behind it. Sanguinius placed his hand upon the surface. It was warm. It beat. He could feel Horus on the other side. Not just the traitor, but the brother he had loved, the man who had once fought beside him beneath the Emperor's light. And though he did not yet see him, Sanguinius knew what waited beyond. Not salvation, not redemption, only destiny, written in blood long before either of them were born. The great doors opened, not with a clang of metal, but a sigh, as though the ship itself relished what was to come. The chamber beyond was vast, cathedral-like, its ceiling lost to shadow, and its walls crawling with symbols that pulsed to the rhythm of Horus's heartbeat. The air shimmered with raw psychic heat. Every breath tasted of ash and sorrow. At the center stood the War Master. Once, Horus Lupercal had been the brightest star of mankind's ambition, the exemplar of unity, the favored son. Now he was a ruin made flesh. His armor, blackened and fused with demonic forms, seemed to breathe. Great wings of shadow rippled behind him, not feathers, but tendrils of the warp itself. His eyes glowed like twin suns swallowed by madness. Sanguinius stopped a dozen paces away, his own wings half furled, halo flickering. Between them hung a silence that spanned millennia. All their victories, all their laughter, all the brotherhood that had once held the Imperium together. Horus, he whispered, the name trembling with grief. The War Master turned. For a heartbeat there was recognition, the faintest trace of the brother he had loved. Then it was gone. The voice that answered was a storm. You should not have come, Angel. You know how this ends. I came because I still believe, Sanguinius said. There is still light in you. I can feel it. Horus smiled, a broken, mocking thing. Light? There is no light here, only truth. You worship a corpse on a throne and you call it faith. I see now, brother. I see everything he denied us. Sanguinius stepped forward, each word laced with pain. You see only lies the warp has fed you. Look at what you've become. The man I knew would never do this. Never turn his hand against our father, against us. The air rippled. For an instant, Horus's face softened, a flicker of the noble warrior he had been. But then, like glass shattering, it was gone. His laughter filled the chamber, booming and cruel, echoing off the living walls. Hope is your weakness, Sanguinius. You think love can redeem me? You think faith can stop what's already begun? The laughter became a roar, and in that instant, he struck. The first blow was not physical, but psychic. A tidal wave of warp energy that ripped through the air, throwing Sanguinius back. The angel's armor screamed as his psychic wards burned away. Yet he rose, wings unfurling wide, light flaring from his eyes like molten gold. They collided, gods in human form. The impact shattered the deck beneath them, reality warping around the clash of their wills. Sword met talon, faith met fury. Every strike was a memory. Ulanor, Davin, terror yet to come. Every parry a plea unspoken. Sanguinius's blade carved arcs of light through the darkness, each swing carrying the weight of love and loss. Horus met him with crushing force, each blow a declaration that mercy was dead. Sparks became flames. Flames became storms. The duel was more than battle. It was the death of an age. The echo of every brother's bond breaking across the stars. Sanguinius fought like a dying sun, radiant and desperate. He feinted, turned, struck, his sword biting deep into Horus's side, drawing ichor black as night. The War Master howled, staggering. For a heartbeat, victory seemed possible. Then Horus laughed again, low, almost tender. You were always the most beautiful of us, little brother. The words were almost loving, and then his gauntleted hand pierced Sanguinius's chest. The blade fell from the angel's grasp. His wings flared wide, feathers burning to ash. Horus lifted him effortlessly, eyes locked on his brother's face. You should have stayed on Terra. You could have died with hope. Sanguinius tried to speak, a word, a prayer, perhaps a name. But only blood came. Horus's hand clenched. The sound was like glass, breaking under divine weight. For an instant, time itself seemed to hold its breath. Then, silence. Sanguinius's body fell, wings torn, his golden blood pooling across the deck. The chamber dimmed, the warp receding in reverence or fear. Horus looked down at his fallen brother, expression unreadable. No triumph, no joy, only the hollow echo of something lost forever. Outside, in the void above Terra, the Astronomicon flickered. A light unseen by mortals wavered, as if the galaxy itself felt the wound. And in that silent instant, the galaxy shifted its course forever. It began as a tremor in the warp, a soundless ripple that spread through the Imperium like a wound in creation, and every Psyker in the Sol system screamed. The Astronomicon, that eternal flame that had burned unbroken for 10,000 battles and 1,000,000 prayers, flickered. Its light faltered, not by chance, but by grief. In the depths of the Imperial Palace, where the air itself hummed with power, the Emperor of mankind paused. He had no need of mortal senses to perceive it. The moment struck him like the collapse of a star, a psychic detonation that tore through the walls of his consciousness and left silence in its wake, a silence shaped like Sanguinius. His eyes, those fathomless pools of gold and sorrow, closed. For the first time since the dawn of the Great Crusade, the Emperor bowed his head. The sound of the Astronomicon's faltering echoed through the very foundations of Terra. Vox networks shorted out. Cherub servitors wept oil. Choirs of astropaths burst into flames mid-song, their final notes carried into the warp as burning whispers. In the Hall of Leng, the sigillite Malcador felt it too. He stumbled, clutching his staff, eyes clouding with tears he did not permit himself to shed. He saw the psychic reflection of the event, the flare of Sanguinius's soul extinguished by the claw of betrayal. He knew then that the prophecy of despair had begun to unfold. Malcador turned his gaze toward the throne room, where the Emperor sat motionless upon his dais. The air trembled, distorting like heat above a forge. He could feel it, the Emperor's fury building, slow and inexorable, like the rising of a god who had sworn never to be one. "My lord," Malcador whispered, voice trembling. "If you unleash it now, nothing will remain." The Emperor did not answer. He could not, because in that moment, he felt, truly felt, the death of his son. Not through words, nor through the cold understanding of telepathic distance, but through the severing of a bond that transcended flesh. He felt the golden light of Sanguinius collapse inward, consumed by the black hole of Horus's corruption. The chamber around him began to shift. The marble underfoot cracked. Gold leaf peeled from walls as unseen pressure filled the air. Servo-cherubs fell from their flight, their wings melting like wax in the sun. The custodians at the gates staggered beneath the invisible weight pressing down upon them. Through the cracks of reality, a faint light began to bleed. Too bright, too holy, too terrible. In the shadows of the throne dais, Captain General Constantin Valdor dropped to one knee. His voice was calm, but his heart quaked. "He feels it, doesn't he? The angel. He's gone." Malcador nodded, every syllable a struggle. "And when a god mourns, the universe weeps with him." The custodians raised their guardian spears in unison, though none spoke. They did not know what was coming, only that it would change everything. The psychic storm spread outward from the throne room, rippling through the palace, through the Imperium itself. Worlds across the Segmentum Solar dimmed as their astropathic channels screamed open. Ships faltered in orbit. Pilgrims on Terra fell to their knees, clutching their heads, weeping without knowing why. The Emperor opened his eyes. The light within them had changed. No longer the patient fire of a visionary, but the storm of retribution incarnate. Somewhere far above the palace, thunder rolled where no air existed to carry sound. Malcador whispered again, though the words were meant for himself. "May mercy find Horus now, for none else will." And deep beneath the golden throne, the custodians felt it too, that something divine was awakening, something long held back by love, now unleashed by loss. The silence did not last. Nothing divine remained still for long. When the Emperor rose from the golden throne, the air itself split in protest. Every psychic ward in the chamber shattered like glass. The custodians fell to their knees, their visors flooding with static as they tried to look upon him and failed. His form had begun to change, light bleeding through flesh, veins of gold burning beneath his skin. Malcador cried out, voice lost beneath the storm.
My liege!
You cannot, but the Emperor was already gone. Reality folded, and in the next instant he stood upon the walls of the Imperial Palace. Above him, the skies of terror burned red, a canopy of smoke and ruin. The ground shook beneath the tread of titans. The air reeked of blood, promethium, and despair. Yet when he appeared, all sound faltered, for even war itself pauses to look upon a god. He raised his hand, and the heavens screamed. Light burst from him, not warmth, not salvation, but the raw essence of creation unbound. It swept across the battlefield in concentric waves, erasing distinctions between metal and bone, faith and fear. Traitor legions disintegrated where they stood, their armor vaporizing before their bodies turned to ash. War engines melted into slag, their machine spirits wailing as they dissolved into the ether. To the loyalists, it was rapture. To the heretics, it was judgment. To the universe, it was terror. Those who were closest to him, mortal soldiers, guardsmen, even the faithful sisters who had taken up arms in desperation, burst into light as they prayed. Their voices rose in one final chorus, hymns of devotion that became soundless as their bodies turned to radiant dust. Ave Imperator, deliver us. The words were the last thing they ever spoke. From orbit, the glow of terror's surface could be seen, a blazing wound upon the world, pulsing with the heartbeat of something greater than life or death. Ships of the traitor fleets tried to flee, but the warp itself convulsed in response to his wrath. The storms tore them apart before they could escape. Even the demons screamed. The Emperor strode through the ruins of his own palace, every step reshaping reality. The ground beneath him turned to glass. Statues of saints cracked and wept molten gold. Vox channels across the Imperium filled with static, then with his voice. Not spoken, but felt. My son is dead. Those words alone carried the weight of galaxies. The custodians followed at a distance, their armor melting at the edges, their souls trembling under the pressure of proximity. They could not approach. They could only witness. Valdor's voice came through broken vox. He burns the heavens themselves. Malcador, watching from the inner sanctum, felt tears sting his eyes. He could feel the Emperor's heart, love and agony indistinguishable. There was no malice in this destruction, only grief so vast it became fire. The storm widened. Warp and real space folded together. The walls of the palace trembled, entire spires dissolving into light. Those who survived could no longer tell if they were alive or dreaming. Some saw angels, others saw nothing but endless radiance devouring shadow. And yet, through it all, there was beauty, terrible and pure. The Emperor's aura lit the ruined city like a second sun. Around him, the remnants of the Imperial army fell to their knees. They could not look at him, yet they could not turn away. In that moment, every prayer ever whispered across human history found its answer. A god walked among them, but even gods, it seemed, could bleed. As the light consumed the last bastions of Horus's armies, the Emperor faltered. The fire dimmed, flickering with sorrow instead of fury. Somewhere beyond the carnage, he felt Horus waiting, upon the vengeful spirit, where his fallen son's body still lay cooling upon the deck. The Emperor lowered his hand. The light began to recede, but its afterimage remained, etched into the eyes of every survivor, burned into the very soil of terror. What was left was silence, the kind that follows creation, or the kind that follows loss. The light had faded from the battlefield, but its echoes still burned within the air. A heat that did not cool, a silence that screamed. In the ruins of the Sanctum Imperialis, the Emperor stood motionless. The psychic storm that had consumed legions now lingered about him like a living aura. His golden armor was cracked, veins of light leaking through every fracture. His eyes glowed not with flame, but with the impossible clarity of one who saw everything and wished he did not. Around him lay the aftermath of his wrath. Mountains reduced to molten plains, rivers of light running where blood once flowed, and the hollow shells of men who had prayed too close to the divine. Malcador the Sigillite approached first. His staff trembled in his hand, not from age, but from the weight of what he now faced. Rogel Dawn followed, his armor blackened and scarred, eyes burning with desperate resolve. They stopped several paces away, the last mortals who dared to speak to him. "My lord," Malcador said softly, "you must stop. Your wrath serves none now. Terror bleeds from your grief. The Emperor did not move. When he finally spoke, the sound was not of voice, but of thunder drawn into words. They took him from me. The words carried across the ruins, shaking the stones, rippling through the warp like a god's heartbeat. Dawn stepped forward, his voice unflinching. Then let vengeance wait until reason returns. The Imperium still stands, but it cannot endure you like this. For a moment, the Emperor looked at him, truly looked, and Dawn felt as though every thought he'd ever held was laid bare. His courage, his fear, his faith. Reason? The Emperor murmured. You would speak to me of reason when my son lies slain by the one I trusted most, when the dream I built is crumbling into ash. Malkador raised his hand, tears streaking the dust on his face. You are not grief, my lord. You are hope. The Imperium needs its emperor, not a god of retribution. The air began to shimmer again. Space itself bent around the Emperor's form. Hope? He whispered. There is no hope left, only duty. And vengeance is duty. A crack split the sky. The warp responded. Reality thinned, and demons began to gather at the edges of perception, not to attack, but to worship. Shapes of living shadow and flame coiled above the palace, drawn to the eruption of power like moths to a dying star. Their whispers became hymns in languages older than mankind. Dawn's gauntlet tightened around his sword hilt. He's drawing them, he said under his breath. Every horror in the Immaterium can feel him. Malkador staggered as psychic wind tore through the sanctum, his robes whipping violently. They are not here for war, he gasped. They are here to witness. The Emperor raised his head, and for the briefest instant his human face was gone. In its place shone something vast, too bright for mortal eyes, too infinite for thought. A crown of fire encircled his head. His voice filled the warp itself. Horus! The name exploded across eternity. Every demon within 1,000 light years screamed and fell silent. Every psyker collapsed, their minds scorched by the sheer sound of it. The warp boiled, stars flickered, and the dead stirred in their tombs. The Emperor's roar transcended worlds. It was not merely a name, it was a command, a curse, a father's cry that split the fabric of creation. Even in the eye of terror, echoes of it rippled, and the gods of chaos themselves turned their gaze toward terror, smiling, for they knew the mask had fallen. The Emperor's restraint, forged over centuries of reason and love, had shattered. And somewhere, aboard the vengeful spirit, Horus heard him. He lifted his head, blood still staining his armor, and smiled. Then come, father, he whispered. Let the gods see which of us they have truly made. The sky had changed. No one knew when. Only that one moment it burned gold, and the next, it bled red. The clouds had curdled into streaks of scarlet, pulsing like veins across the heavens. Every breath carried the taste of copper and ash. Sergeant Ilias didn't understand what had happened. None of them did. But they felt it. Every man and woman across the lines felt it, like something inside their skulls had torn open. At first came the silence, then the scream. It wasn't sound. It was inside them, behind the eyes, threading through every nerve. It was grief distilled into a frequency, raw, endless, and utterly divine. The Astartes called it the Crimson Morning. The Vox channels burned out within seconds, fried by psychic feedback. Medici tents filled with soldiers clawing at their own faces, trying to stop the sound that wasn't sound. And above it all, the Blood Angels screamed. They had dropped from the heavens like meteors, their crimson armor blackened with soot, their eyes burning with something not entirely mortal. They fought not with tactics now, but with fury, beautiful and terrible. Ilias had seen them before, disciplined angels of death, each strike a prayer, each motion perfection. What he saw now were monsters. They tore through traitor and loyalist alike, blind to distinction, driven by grief that had become hunger. Their blades sang dirges that none should hear. Emperor, preserve us, whispered Trooper Caden beside him. They've lost their minds. No, Ilias said, watching one blood angel crush a screaming word-bearer's skull barehanded. They've lost their heart. The world around them was ending. Vox traffic devolved into prayers and screams. Entire regiments broke rank, some kneeling in worship of the burning sky, others throwing down arms and fleeing into the ruins. The banners of the Imperium, once symbols of unity, lay trampled in the mud. Ilias tried to rally his men, but no one listened anymore. Orders meant nothing when gods themselves were bleeding. Then, a flicker of light, a pulse from the horizon that blinded every scope and visor. It was him. The Emperor was moving. Even from this distance, they could see the column of golden fire cutting through the smog, a spear of radiance that split heaven and earth. The air turned to glass where he passed. Entire divisions knelt without command, not in devotion, in terror. "He's coming for Horus," someone whispered. "Then it's over," another said. Ilias didn't answer. He just watched as the horizon burned brighter, brighter still, until nothing remained but the glare. He thought of the old prayers, the ones his grandmother whispered before the ecclesiarchy even had a name. Light is salvation. Light is mercy. But as the Emperor's brilliance consumed the skyline, as men and angels alike screamed beneath it, Ilias understood what the ancients had forgotten. Light could destroy, too. The imperial palace, the heart of mankind's dominion, was dying. Its walls, once carved from the bones of mountains and sanctified by 1,000 rites, now trembled like living things under the weight of unseen forces. The sky above was no longer sky, but a bruise of light and shadow. The reflection of the Emperor's fury made manifest. Every breath inside the palace tasted of ozone and despair. The custodians stood like statues in corridors that bent and groaned. Marble floors wept molten gold. The air itself shimmered, warping as the Emperor's psychic aura bled through reality, twisting sanctums into echoes of the warp. And then, the first wall fell. It wasn't from bombardment. There was no impact, no breach. The stones simply disintegrated in silence, the matter unmade by pure energy. Whole battalions of the Imperial fists vanished in a pulse of light. Their armor reduced to shadows burnt into the walls. Rogel Dawn felt it. Not as a sound, but as a pressure behind the eyes. The unmistakable signature of divine rage unleashed. "He cannot contain it," Malkador whispered, voice trembling as he staggered through the sanctum's blinding corridors. "He will not." Every scion on Terra screamed that hour. The Astronomicon pulsed erratically, its beacon flickering like a dying star. Vox traffic dissolved into broken prayers. Rumors spread faster than light. "The angel is dead!" The words rippled across the ranks like infection. From the lowest hab block to the highest citadel, men and women fell to their knees. Some wept, others screamed, but not all prayed. Desperation twisted faith into fear, and fear into worship of something else. In the lower vaults, whispers began to gather. A new litany, forbidden yet irresistible. They spoke Horus's name not as curse but as title. "He slew the angel," they murmured. "He stands against the Emperor's madness." Even among the shattered regiments defending the Eternity Gate, a few began to falter, believing perhaps that Horus, for all his heresy, was the only god left who could still hear them. The Imperium had not yet fallen, but its heart had cracked. The throne had become a tomb, and within that tomb, the Emperor's light grew brighter, harsher, no longer salvation, but warning. Across the void above Terra, order died in silence. The Blood Angels' fleet, once radiant and disciplined as a choir of flame, had become a storm of madness. Their ships drifted without formation, some burning bright with reactor fires, others tearing through friendly squadrons as if vengeance itself had seized the helms. On the command decks, captains screamed litanies that turned into animal howls, their gene seed echoing the psychic wound of their fallen Primarch. The crimson mourning had become a contagion. Every heartbeat was an echo of Sanguinius's death cry. "The angel is gone," one captain whispered over the Vox, his voice hollow. "But his rage remains. Let it burn us clean." He rammed his strike cruiser into a word-bearer battleship, and both vessels vanished in a single flare of light. In the warp beyond, the Ultramarines' relief fleet struggled toward Terra, guided by faith, not instruments. But the Imperium had shifted. The Emperor's unleashed power tore through the immaterium like a nova, and what once was a beacon had become a storm. Robout Guilliman watched the Astronomicon flicker, his face illuminated by dying light. "We are lost," he murmured. "Even the stars do not know the way." No signal reached Terra. No reinforcement would come. Within the palace, Rogel Dawn stood before the tactical hololith, its surface fractured by feedback static. Reports streamed in, fragmentary, Meaningless, fleets gone silent, legions splintered, civilians rioting, faith eroding. "My lord," said a weary Vox officer, blood trickling from his nose, "there are prayers to Horus in the lower Habs." Dawn's gauntlets clenched. For a moment he said nothing. Then, quietly, "Even gods may fall, even faith may rot." He turned away from the hololith, the faint golden glow of the Emperor's wrath bleeding through the walls. Malcador's words still lingered. He will not contain it. Now Dawn understood. The war was no longer against Horus, it was against the Emperor's own unraveling, a divinity bleeding itself to death through grief and fury. Outside, terror burned. Inside, the throne hummed with unbearable energy. Dawn knew what no loyal son should ever admit. "We cannot win," he whispered to the empty hall. "Only delay the ending long enough for him to finish his war, or himself." And in that single thought, the Imperium of Man crossed a threshold it could never return from. The shattering of faith was complete. Terror had ceased to be a world. It had become a wound. The siege of the Imperial Palace reached its last convulsion, not battle, but annihilation given form. The skies were blackened with ash and fire, where orbital debris burned like falling saints, and titans marched through oceans of ruin. Their footfalls cracked the crust of the world, their god engines wreathed in the smoke of entire continents. Horus had unleashed everything. From the void above came the guttural hymns of the traitor fleets, the gutted carcasses of lunar wolves. Vessels now refitted as altars of living metal, spilling demons like a tide. Warp fissures opened across the walls of terror, bleeding madness into the soil. Cultists flooded through the breaches, chanting the names of gods that were no longer whispers, but presences. The palace's outer bastions fell one by one, each collapse, shaking the throne world like the beat of a dying heart. The imperial fists fought to the last, yellow armor blackened with soot and blood, their bolters singing until the barrels melted, and through it all, the Emperor stood upon the battlements, no longer a distant myth, no longer hidden upon the throne. He walked among his sons, his light flickering between flesh and flame. Those who saw him wept, for in his eyes they glimpsed not serenity, but grief beyond the measure of gods. Every gesture was destruction incarnate. Bolts of living lightning arced from his outstretched hand, vaporizing titans in single strikes. Demons turned to ash mid-laughter. The warp itself recoiled, its tides breaking against his will. Yet for every horror undone, 100 more took its place. Horus's laughter echoed through the heavens, not from his ship, but from everywhere. It reverberated through the bones of the dying, through the crumbling walls, through the Vox itself. A single mocking tone that turned victory into despair. The Emperor paused at the edge of the Eternity Gate, where banners once gleamed with imperial gold, but now hung scorched and tattered. His robes were torn, his armor cracked, the Aquila scorched black. The air around him shimmered with the weight of his fury. Too vast, too bright for mortal eyes. "He comes," he whispered, not in speech, but in thought that rippled through 1,000 psyches at once. And from orbit, the vengeful spirit began its descent. It moved like a continent falling from the heavens, shrouded in warp fire, its hull wreathed in the screams of the damned. The flagship of treachery, the birthplace of heresy. The Emperor's light rose to meet it. The final confrontation was no longer prophecy or dream. It was now inevitable. And as the two lights, one radiant, one corrupted, drew toward each other across the bleeding skies of terror, even the warp fell silent in anticipation. The gods themselves leaned close to watch. The world held its breath. The Eternity Gate, the threshold between mankind's dream and its damnation, burned beneath a storm that had no sky. Warp light cascaded through shattered marble as the vengeful spirit hung overhead, a black sun bleeding ruin. And from its shadow descended Horus Lupercal. He landed with the weight of an empire, armored in the shifting flesh of the warp, his eyes twin furnaces of godfire. Once, he had been the War Master, noble, radiant, humanity's brightest sun. Now, he was every sin given muscle and memory. Across the blasted causeway, the Emperor awaited him. His robes billowed in a wind that came from nowhere, the air itself trembling with his presence. The ground beneath his feet glowed faintly gold, not from warmth, but from judgment. They faced each other across a sea of corpses, father and son, god and weapon. For a moment, there was silence. "You should not have come to this," the Emperor said softly. "You made me what I am," Horus replied. The first blow shattered the air. Their clash ignited the sky, splitting clouds from horizon to horizon. Every impact was a scream in the warp, a pulse of energy that rippled across the Imperium itself. Demons howled, distant Psykers convulsed. Across 1,000 worlds, candles guttered in unison as creation flinched. The Emperor's sword blazed with the light of a dying sun. Horus's talon tore through it like smoke. Where their blades met, time stuttered. The custodians who tried to approach were thrown back, bones liquefied by proximity. Titans faltered, mid-stride, their machine spirits overwhelmed by the psychic conflagration. The duel was not of war, but of belief. Faith against defiance, order against freedom, love against pride. And yet, this was not the battle the Emperor had foreseen. In the true history, Sanguinius' death had left a wound upon Horus. A moment's hesitation, a sliver of guilt through which the Emperor's mercy might have entered. But now, that wound did not exist. Horus fought with purity, not of virtue, but of conviction. There was no doubt left to exploit, no hesitation to pierce, only purpose. "Do you see now?" Horus roared, hurling lightning that tore open the heavens. "The gods have made me whole. You sought to bind humanity to your will. I have freed them." The Emperor parried, his expression unreadable beneath the golden light. "You have chained them to madness." Their voices became thunder. The warp became their echo. Horus struck again, faster than thought, his claws rending through psychic wards like paper. The Emperor staggered as golden ichor spilled from his side. The light dimmed. For the first time in 10,000 years, he bled. The Imperium howled. The gods exulted. The ground cracked beneath their feet, molten stone rising like tides. The air turned to glass, and still they fought. Two titans locked in a moment that would decide all of time. Horus drove his fist into the Emperor's chest, shattering armor, tearing flesh. Power cascaded outward, a psychic storm that erased armies and silenced the world. The Emperor fell to one knee, his breath a golden mist. Horus loomed above him, wreathed in the combined gifts of the four: Khorne's rage, Nurgle's endurance, Tzeentch's cunning, Slaaneish's perfection. He had become the sum of all corruption, the mirror of divinity itself. "You cannot stop me," Horus whispered, his voice trembling with triumph. "You cannot even save yourself." And as the Emperor raised his eyes, sorrow flickered there, not for the galaxy, but for the sun who had once been light incarnate. Then Horus struck again, and the gods rejoiced. Silence fell, the kind of silence that exists only after gods have screamed. The Emperor lay broken upon the steps of the Eternity Gate, his armor split open, golden blood pooling beneath him like molten sunlight. Around him, reality itself flickered. Vox spirits wept static. The earth groaned beneath the weight of unreality, and every soul on Terra felt the same impossible truth. He had fallen. Horus stood over him, breathing in ragged, molten gasps. His armor no longer resembled metal. It was alive, rippling with veins of warp light, each pulse echoing the heartbeat of the Chaos Gods themselves. His eyes burned not with hatred now, but ecstasy. "You called yourself the master of mankind," he whispered. "Now watch as I become the master of all that remains." He turned from the Emperor's bleeding form and strode toward the golden throne. Once the seat of divine governance, it now pulsed like an open wound, conduits hissing, psionic light bleeding through its machinery. Servitors, fused long ago to its structure, screamed as Horus's presence warped their minds into ecstatic madness. The War Master ascended the dais, each step reverberating like the tolling of a funeral bell. Lightning flickered across the throne room's ruined vaults as he seated himself upon it. For a moment, the galaxy held its breath. The warp howled in anticipation. Then Horus reached out, his claws digging into the throne's conduits, merging flesh with machine. The Astronomicon flared. Every astropath in the Imperium screamed. The beacon that once guided humanity across the stars twisted into something monstrous. Its light turned crimson, no longer a star of hope, but a wound in the void. Fleets lost in the warp turned their course toward the new signal, unaware that it was no longer salvation, but enslavement. The Golden Throne became a conduit of damnation, a bridge not to order, but to absolute dominion. Through it, Horus's will poured outward, endless, unrelenting, divine. On 1,000 worlds, statues of the Emperor cracked and reformed in his image. In the dark cathedra of the ecclesiarchy, priests fell to their knees, unable to resist the compulsion that rippled through their souls. Av Dominus Horus. The chant began as a whisper on terror, the breath of dying soldiers, the murmur of the damned. But it spread, carried on the psychic wind, growing louder, stronger, until it echoed across every hive, every ship, every shrine. Ave Dominus Horus, Ave Dominus Horus. The skies above Terra bled, lightning carved runes of chaos across the storm clouds. The oceans boiled, the Astronomicon pulsed in rhythm with Horus's heart. A red sun blazing above the world that once called itself the throne of man. And somewhere in the rubble below, the Emperor stirred, his light dim, his body broken, yet his mind still alive, watching the birth of the galaxy's new god. The great dream was over. The age of Horus had begun. Ave Dominus Horus. Centuries passed, though time no longer obeyed its own laws. The age of Horus had no beginning and would know no end. Terror, once the throne of man, had become something else entirely, a demon world of order, where every breath, every thought, and every prayer bent toward the will of its dark god. Above it hung a sun of crimson warp light, the corrupted Astronomicon, pulsing in rhythm with Horus's immortal heart. It illuminated not day, but dominion. Under its glow, the palace was no longer a fortress of marble and gold, but a cathedral of flesh and metal, its spires fused into veins that pulsed with psychic energy. The Golden Throne was now inseparable from its master. Horus sat enthroned at its core, half divine, half corpse, a being of radiant decay. His armor had merged with the machine's conduits, his veins carrying the Astronomicon's pulse across the galaxy. His face, once noble, was now serene in monstrosity. He no longer needed to speak. His will was law. Across the stars, the warp storms thickened until they devoured constellations. Fleets drifted blindly through the void, bound not by navigation but by faith. Astropaths no longer heard the Emperor's guiding song, only the droning chant of Horus's endless psalms. The War Master is all. Through his victory, the stars burn eternal. Humanity had survived, but survival had become worship. Every world was a shrine. Every laborer a supplicant. Children were born beneath frescoes depicting Horus's triumph, the slaying of the false emperor, the subjugation of angels, the cleansing of doubt. To question was heresy. To disbelieve was erasure. The Astartes endured, but as reflections of their former glory. The lunar wolves, now reborn as the Legiones Sancti Horusi, were the high priests of ruin. They wandered the stars as crusaders of the new order, clad in armor inscribed with blasphemous scripture. Each carried relics of the siege, shards of the Emperor's armor, his blood crystallized in glass, fragments of the shattered Aquila. The Blood Angels, those who survived the Crimson Morning, were now mad prophets, crimson-robed ascetics who drank from warp-born chalices, seeking the echo of their slain Primarch. Their faith had curdled into devotion to pain, each scar an offering to the Warmaster's glory. Even Guilliman's Ultramarines were broken, their discipline devoured by despair. In the shadow of their lost father, they built perfect cities of decay, realms where logic served chaos and order became ritual. The galaxy had not burned, it had endured. But endurance was the cruelest fate of all. The dream of mankind, the dream of unity, reason, and light had rotted into eternal servitude. And upon his throne of veins and flame, Horus Lupercal, the Ascended, the Betrayer, the god of dominion, opened his burning eyes and gazed upon the galaxy he had won. "They are free," he whispered. At last, the stars flickered in answer, and the age of ruin continued, endless and absolute. They say the Emperor is dead, but the warp remembers. Not as a god, nor even as a man, but as a wound that will not close. In the endless storms that now shroud the galaxy, there drifts a faint light, a remnant of golden fire that refuses to fade. It flickers at the edges of nightmares, a warmth that cannot be smothered. Some say it is the last echo of his soul, broken and scattered when Horus ascended. Others claim it is his shadow, cursed to wander forever through the madness he once sought to tame. Wherever lost Psykers scream their final prayers before being consumed. Sometimes they hear a voice, not thunderous but soft, not command but comfort. Not all light is lost. Endure. Those who survive such encounters awaken changed. Their eyes burn faintly gold. Their minds whisper of vast sunlit halls and a throne of radiant ruin. They call him the Emperor that was. No one knows whether he truly speaks, or if the warp itself mocks the memory of hope. Yet the legends spread, carried by the faith of the desperate, whispered in the shadows of demon worlds and in the holds of broken ships that drift between stars. They say he wanders the Imperium barefoot, wrapped in rags of light, his crown shattered, his hands still bleeding. Around him circle the ghosts of those who died for him. Rogel Dawn's silent reflection, Malkador's fading ember, and the weeping echo of Sanguinius's wings. In their passing, the warp stills. For a heartbeat, even demons bow their heads, and somewhere, in the darkest reaches beyond sight, the faintest of prophecy stirs. The whisper of wings reborn, of blood redeemed, of the angel's return. The Emperor dreams still, the seers murmur, and dreams can wake. Yet whether this is mercy or madness, no mortal can say. Only that the light endures, flickering, fragile, and beautiful, in defiance of eternity. The warp is never still. It churns and whispers, feeding upon the echoes of souls long since undone. Yet somewhere within its endless storm, there drifts a body, Sanguinius, the angel, frozen in the void, untouched by decay, as if time itself mourns to move past him. His wings, once white as dawn, lie folded and darkened, now streaked with veins of silver fire. His blood, spilled by a brother's hand, floats in crystalline beads across the abyss. Each droplet pulses faintly, casting a halo of light into the surrounding darkness. Fragments of a soul too pure to be wholly consumed. The warp recoils around him. Demons dare not draw near. Even in death, he is sacred. The camera draws close, the silence deafening, the colors muted into a tapestry of black and red. The narrator's voice returns, soft as morning wind. In every telling of the great betrayal, the angel must fall so that mankind might rise. We see flashes, visions of other realities, other outcomes. In some, his sacrifice inspires hope. In others, it grants the Emperor strength to end the war. But in this one, there is nothing, no salvation, no dawn, only ruin. Except here, the voice continues, trembling with regret. No one rose. The last crystal of his blood drifts toward the light of a dying star, and as it touches the edge of its glow, it flares briefly, impossibly bright. For a single heartbeat, the galaxy remembers what it once was, a place where angels still dared to dream. Then, the light fades, darkness claims the frame, and in that eternal silence, a final whisper lingers, faint, distant, and unbearably human. Even gods can die too soon. There is no victory song in this age, no banners raised, no empire rebuilt, only echoes, drifting through the warp, carried on the dying breath of memory. The galaxy that once burned with purpose now smolders beneath the weight of its own sins. The dream of unity has become a curse, and mankind, once chosen, once divine, kneels beneath the gaze of the War Master enthroned. Terror is not a beacon. It is a wound, a monument of light that bleeds eternally into the void. The Emperor's ghost wanders still, unseen and unheeded. Sanguinius's body drifts among the storms, a reminder that even angels fall when hope is lost. And across the stars, in 1,000 dying worlds, mortals whisper the names of heroes who will never return. There was a time, the voice murmurs, when men believed the light could never die. A pause, a breath, the faint sound of distant thunder. But light is not immortal. It flickers, it fades, and sometimes it is extinguished before it can guide the way. A single note hums, low, mournful, reverent. The screen fades to black as the final line lingers, both epitaph and warning. Remember the angel, for in his fall we see our own. The sound cuts. Only silence remains. If this alternate heresy gripped you, stand with us again. Like this chronicle, share it, and keep the memory of the angel alive. The galaxy remembers, even when it shouldn't.